everyone. Welcome to Barks to Basics with Jamie Diaz. I am your host. Today we have two very special guests I'm super excited about because I don't think that a lot of people know about Family Paws and that there is help out there for people with children, babies, toddlers. So Family Paws Parent Education really focuses on babies and toddlers in the home with your dogs to be able to get along together. So it really is dog and baby safety and the dynamics that you would face in the home. But I want to welcome Lisa and Elysia. Hi, guys.
Hi.
So nice for
Thank
you
you.
to be here. So I definitely want to hear from you guys and your kind of experience, but I've been with Family Paws Parent Education since my daughter's 10, so right before that. And my experience was, first of all, for any people that are pregnant out there, please call us. Call one of us. We'll give you all the contact information, but it's very stressful being a new mom, first of all. And I think it's funny because even the dogs that people say, my dog's going to be great, he's going to be fine, those are always the ones that are like so in tune with mom and so attached to mom that have the most trouble. I find that people just don't do any kind of education with their dogs, and then they have the baby and it's like a nightmare. I know that when I had my daughter, I took the course with Jen Shyrock, the founder, creator of Family Paws, and it was, I forget how many weeks. I don't know if you guys remember. It was like, I don't know. It was an extensive course about dog baby, what to do before the baby comes in the home. And I have to tell you, I was so stressed in the beginning with my daughter. I had 5 dogs at the time that I literally would have been like, who are we giving away first? Like, it just, your priorities shift. You can say all you want, but if it's either the dog or the baby, the dog's going, right? So thank God I took this course because it really did save me. And obviously now I'm an educator for Family Paws. I have been for 10 plus years. So it really saved my relationship with my dogs, gave me so many pointers that we can go over some. But Lisa, let's start with you. What have been your experience and some of the things that you see with new moms, toddlers that you can kind of share with us?
Sure. And I think you brought up a really good point that people look at their dogs and their relationship with their dogs is great, particularly if they've had the dog for years and there's this great pattern of behaviors where everybody knows the routines and things, the household is calm. They have no reason to believe that the dog is going to react anything other than as excited as the parents are for this new child. That it's a real surprise for some of these folks how much harder it is for the dog than they thought. I think those people I don't hear from until after the baby is born. More often, the people that I hear from before the baby is born are people that already recognize some of the sensitivities that their dog has. So they know that their dog is reactive to certain situations, and that's kind of a loaded term, but everybody kind of understands that that means, the dog gets uptight and lunges and barks, or maybe hides or shows some nervousness. And somehow they've become aware that, gee, this might not be the best thing when my baby's around, whether it's because they're concerned about the dog with the baby or whether they're concerned about supporting their dog, which I love when that's the perspective people come in with. My dog was my first child, and I don't want my dog to feel like they're no longer important to me
Yeah.
because that's half the battle. That's terrific that you're thinking about how to be dog aware with this huge transition that's about to happen in your household.
Yeah.
And
I
so
love
that's what
that.
we work with a lot.
Yeah. And Elysia, how are you? I know you said since 2020 you've been with Family Paws. So what is your experience so far? Some of the things that you see, and why did you even get into this to be an educator?
Yeah, so I became an educator because I had a baby and I was that parent that was like, oh, it'll be fine. My dog's been around kids. She's been fine. It's been absolutely like she's never had an issue. So when I brought my son home, it wasn't the baby phase that was the issue, it was the toddler phase. And thank goodness I found Family Paws at the time because there was lots of things that I learned around that first movement that became really difficult for my dog to understand.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that's where I find a lot of people come to us as well, is that toddlerhood, that first movement, the first crawling, the first time the baby sits up and looks at the dog. Then we see some different reactions from the dog. And then I get a lot of phone calls around that, usually around that 6 month mark. And because of Family Paws, I've actually centered my whole business around helping families.
Oh, wow. I love that. I think it's such a unique resource, Family Paws, because there's nothing else really like that to give the support, and also not to knock down any regular trainers, but it really is a specialized field that, I'm proud to say, like, I specialize in dog baby. I think also because I had 5 dogs in the baby and I was a psychopath, because I was like, I am not going to be the dog trainer that gets their child bit. So I was really strict about the interactions and making sure everybody was safe. But I think in the beginning, like you said, for toddlers, it's probably, I mean, for babies, it's usually easier because you just stick them down and, they're there. What have you found? I guess for me, like one of the red flags, let's start with like dog baby. One of the things that I try and like tell people is like, there's no really introduction. Everyone thinks like the baby has to be brought to the dog and it's like all the sniffing and I try to instill in people like they know they're there, right? The dog can come up and sniff safely when you're like holding them, but I think people think they have to have this bond, this like relationship with the other dogs. That's when we see the babies like which I obviously have a heart attack over, like laying next to the babies and stuff like that. What do you think you can tell at least new moms with babies and their dogs that you see? Like I said, for me, it's you don't have to like rush this introduction, right? It's actually better to like slowly do it. What are some tips that you can give to listeners about the baby phase? Whoever you want, if Lisa or
Elysia, you go first this time.
Okay. I think like you said, is the biggest thing is don't rush it, and also let the dog do it at their terms, right? A lot of times that introduction turns into something that we don't want. And most of the time, whoever's holding the baby feels really uncomfortable. And so we want everyone to feel comfortable, not just the dog, not just the baby, but the parents too. And if it doesn't feel safe, then don't do it. Right. So, and I think, like you said, distance, like watching the baby from a distance and watching those milestones happen from a distance is really, really helpful for dogs because then they don't have to get right involved. Dogs don't understand what is happening and they will put themselves in situations that they're uncomfortable with. And we need to help them out so that they can have that space, putting them behind a baby gate so they can still see, but are not physically present with the baby. And making sure you always have that supervision. So when we talk about supervision, we mean that active, aware adult supervision where you have eyes on dog and baby, you're not distracted, and you can redirect as needed, right? So making sure that, and then if you can't do that active, aware adult supervision, that we're putting in some management, right?
Yeah, can
So
you
that dog
explain
is
what that
away, baby
is?
is somewhere else. They have no access to
Sorry,
each
Leach,
other.
can you explain, because I don't, what active adult supervision actually is? Because being
Awake,
in the room,
active adult supervision.
right?
Yeah.
Awake,
Yeah.
thank you, Lisa. If you want to
So
just
active.
explain what that is.
Yeah, active meaning that you are not distracted. There's nothing else going on. You have eyes where you are. You're parent in between dog and baby, or there's some sort of management in place where dog is separated. Aware meaning dog aware. So you understand your dog's body language, that you're not just watching, but you actually understand what your dog is telling you. And that body language piece is so important for new parents as well to understand what their dog is trying to tell them so that they can catch those stress signals way before they ever become an issue. And then obviously awake, as in you're not drowsy, you're not breastfeeding, you're not nodding off, you're not watching TV,
You're
you
not
are awake and
scrolling.
looking.
Yeah, yeah. Lisa, what are some baby things that jump out of you when you meet like a new mom with a baby?
Well, the first thing I tell them is breathe. It's nothing is going to need to be done immediately unless you feel an intense and present danger, in which case, I mean, usually the situation is quite different, and I'm probably already giving guidance before I ever meet the people. Um, most of the time, it's, they're concerned, they've got some sort of idea or sense that something's not right, that they want to improve the situation. And we know because we've had great preparation through Family Paws Parent Education, that there are lots of things that we can do, even just to change the environment around and set everybody up for safety while we take a step back and take a deep breath and figure out what's going on. So usually I just tell people breathe, and then let's take a look at your expectations. Let's make sure that we have fair expectations because our expectations drive our own behavior and our own decisions. And when we are setting fair expectations for the dog and for the presence of dog and baby in the same space, then we're going to set ourselves up to make better decisions. So that would be my first advice is just breathe. And I always compliment people that reach out because that's the first step is you've already recognized that you need some help and great, you were here to help you out.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't know how your clients have been that you've met. A lot of the times they call after there's the problem. So, which is unfortunate. So we try to get moms when they're pregnant and getting the dog ready. I think people don't, it's like a huge change. Listen, some dogs take it on really easy and take it in stride, but some really have a problem with it. And I just think that some owners don't know how drastic of a change this is for the dog to kind of not only a baby with weird noises in the house, you've lost mom and dad's attention. You can say like, however you want. I know I'm going to give them, we're going to take walks together. And then like you have a nightmare baby that doesn't, that you need to constantly pick up on a walk and do different things. And now you can't take the dog on a walk with you with the baby because you need both hands for the baby. And I think for people, I would urge them to really contact us before, any educators. And I'm assuming, so Lisa, you're in Michigan. Elysia, you're in Canada, right? Michigan?
Massachusetts, actually.
I was close. It was an M and up north. Massachusetts and Canada. You guys, I'm assuming, do Zoom calls too for these things. Yeah, I usually say if I can like see you, I can coach you, so you can kind of see the house and the setup. I know Family Paws, we always talk about crates, gates, and tethers and being safe. Do one of you guys want to kind of touch on that? I know I had the 5 dogs. So for me, it was easier to gate the baby, crate the baby in a sense, and have a gate around the baby instead of having the 5 dogs. It was kind of a nightmare. So while the baby was a baby, they were in a stationary place and I was able to put the gate around the baby, not against the dog. But what can you kind of touch base? Can you guys touch base on like the crate, gate, tether kind of scenarios? Go ahead, Lisa.
So we one of the Family Paws phrases that we use is gate, crate, separate, and rotate.
Love that.
It's the management is your friend, but a lot of the dogs have not had that kind of separation prior to the baby arriving. So there has to be this transition time. And one of the things that I love to tell parents is that now is the time to get them used to that in a way where it's not them that's being separated. It's often the baby. As you said, you can put the baby behind the gate so that the baby is in a safe setup. People sometimes have a hard time with this, but I say the baby doesn't care. You're going to have plenty of times where you're bonding with your baby and your baby is in your arms. You need to put your baby down sometimes. And then, if you're able, take a step back and see if you can engage with the dog, and you gradually introduce the idea that the dog is sometimes the one behind the gate, because everything changes once that baby goes mobile. Oh, yeah. And I think the really hard transition for parents is if the dog accepts, as in Alicia's case, accepts the baby without much issue, but then the baby starts to move and isn't staying put where the baby was supposed to be. And dogs are very routine driven, and they like to think they have everything all figured out, and then the baby just throws that all out the window. Yeah. And that's what we want to help them prepare for. So even if they don't feel that the management is necessary while the baby is still very little and not moving, that's going to change rapidly.
Yeah.
And that change, everything that we teach right from before, from pregnancy is dynamic. And, as each developmental stage approaches for the child, we have to reassess the dog's sensitivities, and we need to adjust with those gates, crates, all of that as needed. And it's all part of what Jen developed into the concept of dog aware, which is a more recent development in Family Paws Parent Education. And I don't know if you want me to go into that now, or I can.
Yeah, I would like to. Well, yes, I do, but I would like Elysia, maybe if we can. So we've been talking about babies. Great. Well, now you have a toddler, right? So exactly like you were saying, Elysia, they're used to routine. So you have it all figured out for at least 6 months. Give or take. And now all of a sudden your baby is crawling and reaching for the dog, and they won't stay behind this thing. So I know you went through this a little bit, Elysia. Maybe we can segue into the toddler kind of moments that you started to experience.
Yeah, toddlers are hard because they have a mind of their own and they do not follow direction, right? You can't just say to a 6-month-old, "Oh, don't crawl towards the baby," or "Don't crawl towards the dog," because they're not going to listen. They don't understand, right? And our dogs don't understand either. So that when we're talking about parent in between, if you are having that active aware supervision where dog and baby are in the same room, that's why that supervision is so important. But also management will change with toddlerhood too. So when you can't, sometimes double barriers is what saved me personally. So I had a play yard for my child, and then I had a gate on my stairwell for my dog as well on top of it, so that my toddler could not crawl up to the gate, because a lot of issues happen at the gate too,
Yes.
where the dog's on one side and the toddler's on this side, and the toddler's like poking their fingers through the holes of the gate, and the dog doesn't like that, right? And so sometimes we have issues with that barrier. So making sure that we have even a safe space for our dogs as well can be really, really helpful for toddlerhood, because when they feel overwhelmed, they can find somewhere else to go. So my dog, her safe space was my bedroom. It was a no-go zone for my kids, still is a no-go zone for my children. I have a
Oh, you're very lucky. Can I start that? I got to start
Pardon?
that. I have to start that.
I only had a bathroom.
Do not come in my
kids were
bedroom.
little.
It's fantastic. It works really great because at first I had to teach her that it was a safe zone. So I put her in there with some enrichment and let her just hang out in there. Well, my toddler was getting, into what I call witching hours, where they're just crazy and there's nothing I can do to redirect. And now she puts herself in here. She'll just come up the stairs, put herself in the room, and just take a moment. And you can teach those skills to dogs, right?
Yeah.
So having things like that for your dog can be really, really helpful. And a lot of parents are like, well, I don't want them to be separated all the time. The truth of the matter is they need that downtime. A lot of times when you go from working full time to having baby or staying home with baby, they're not getting that rest period that they need. So a lot of times we need to put them in a rest period as well, so that they can recoup and get a little bit more of their tolerance and their ability to see and learn and not be on edge. Because I know as a new parent myself, I was always on edge because I was exhausted, and I am not my best when I'm tired. Same with our dogs. They're not going to be at their best when they're tired.
Yeah. And I had a safe space was my bedroom, but I did not. My kids were in the bedroom, so I do have to fix that part. But I think too, one of the things too that I hear a lot from parents, which I try to educate and not get too upset about the dog for the dog, is, a lot of parents will say, oh, my dog's good with anything. My kid can take a bone out of his mouth, put the hand in the food, do all this stuff. I mean, for even people doing that, I don't like that. But I think this is when the dog you see those bites. And I'm sure both of you have worked with families that already had the dog bite. It's usually something like, hey, it happened out of nowhere. He was laying there. He's always done this. And, I don't think people really understand body language. So they don't see these subtle signs. And one day the dog has enough and and they kind of go after, the child. I just had a 5-year-old that was just bit in the face, not bad, but from the mom, but it's a bite to the face from the dog. So now we're working backwards, right? Now we're like, oh my gosh, and these interactions. And what have you guys seen that, or how do you what tips can you give to people that if they come to you and say, my dog's good with everything with the kid, he lets her, my dog lets my kid do anything with them.
So I always tell people that tolerance runs out. And tolerance is
Mhm.
too low of a standard for a dog. Just because your dog tolerates things doesn't mean that they enjoy them. And if my dog isn't enjoying my child and doesn't is not enjoying that interaction, then it's not fair to the dog. And nobody ever thinks that a bite's going to happen to them. Out of all of the clients I've ever worked with, I have not had a single person say, we 100% saw that coming. We knew that
Mhm.
bite was happening. So I think cautioning people to say, my dog would never, is something that you need to really take a look at because I catch myself saying that, oh, my dog would never do that. There is always a possibility that a dog can bite and will bite in any circumstance. And a lot of times they'll tolerate things until they don't.
Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of what you're saying. So catching when the dog is showing like lip licks and turnaways and
Mhm.
giving child's whale eyes and things like that, where they're trying to physically move themselves away, or they're doing displacement behaviors where they're like checking their genitals or doing big shake-offs, or if they're licking the baby, that's a big one. A lot of people are like, oh, they love the baby, that the dog licks the baby all the time. But what they don't realize is that's what Jen calls a kiss to
Yep.
dismiss, right? It's that big giant lick to try and get that baby to back off. Or they're doing that appeasement licking where it's obsessive. And I'm like, that's still not safe. The dog is still trying to calm themselves down, and you need to be getting involved in those situations.
Yeah.
Because,
I think it was so powerful what you just said, because it is true. If, a dog will never bite until he does, right? And it's important to say, like, there is not a client, because if there is a client, they'd be calling us, right? That thought their dog was going to bite. That doesn't happen. It's always, I thought he would never do that. My kids are 10 and 8 now, and I always kind of drill into them. Again, I'm a little bit of a psycho with it. I'm like, every dog can bite. You don't like touch any dog. I have like the 5-second rule for them to pet the dog, stop, see what the dog does. We like go over this over and over. Even our dogs can bite, so I think it's super important what you said, that, they're tolerant until they're not, and then we have an issue. I do want you to touch a little bit, Lisa, on the awareness portion that you were going to speak about.
And this is all, it goes back to what is dog awareness, right? And dog awareness it sounds on its face like, well, yeah, we're all aware of our dogs. And I think everybody does have some level of awareness of who their dogs are, and they have skills at reading their dogs to one degree or another, but there's always room to learn more. And like with the supervision, where Jen Shryock, the founder of Family Paws, didn't just leave it as supervise your dog, supervise your children. She really took a deep dive into what does that mean? How do we do that? Dog aware is the same sort of thing. It's a very non-judgmental way of taking a deep dive into what does it mean to be truly dog aware, especially when you have kids in your household. And Dog Aware talks about body language first and foremost, because if you don't recognize your dog's stress signals, you don't recognize when your dog is getting overtired or starting to lose patience, then it's going to be really hard to prevent situations.
Yeah.
That awareness of how your dog is truly reacting, objectively being able to observe your dog and objectively taking the time to observe your dog is just so important. And so it all starts with that. But then understanding what are your dog's sensitivities, truly, what are their sensitivities? If your dog loves to play ball, is obsessive about it, then how are they going to be if the child has a ball to play with? How are they going to be if there are bubbles being blown, or the child happens to be carrying a balloon? So understanding, what are your dog's sensitivities? How might that translate to situations that involve your child? We also talk about proximity. So once you understand to watch your dog's body
Hmm.
language and you understand that your dog has sensitivities that you're going to pay attention to, it's not just about sensitivities, it's about sensitivities within any given environment and situation. And proximity, so the distance that the dog is from that particular, what we would call a trigger, becomes really important. And this is where, especially with toddlers who are just being toddlers, they're not being bad kids. They're doing all kinds of things that might trigger the dog. I am partial myself to herding breeds. Herding breeds have a really, really strong sense of motion and paying attention to motion. And if there's anything that triggers a border collie or a shepherd, it's a child running.
Yeah,
right?
I was gonna say, throw them a toddler.
Yeah, exactly. You want to send that dog into
Yeah.
overdrive.
Yeah.
It's like, what do I do? What do I do? Even if it's and this is arousal that is neither positive or negative. This might not be anxiety. This might be excitement.
Yeah.
But it's still arousal, and we still have to address it. And I think that's one of the things our families have to understand too, is that we're not always talking about the dog that is reactive in a bad way. We're talking about the dog that becomes so aroused, either excited or upset, that they start regressing more into reaction rather than conscious thought. Because when we teach our dogs various things about living in our homes with our humans, we're teaching them a lot of things that are actually counter to normal canine behavior. And the more aroused these dogs become, the more likely they're falling back on their ancient programming, if you will. They're falling back on instincts that probably don't agree with what we would call good behavior. And that's where we get these miscommunications. The dog is not being any, more of a bad dog than the child is being a bad child. But we have these miscommunications because everybody's getting excited and the dog is therefore falling back on behaviors that we don't want, which leads us to that last pillar of dog aware, which is the supervision piece. Once we understand that we have to modulate distance as well as understand our dog's sensitivities and body language, then we can be much more precise about how we supervise and the decisions we make about when to allow inclusion. And that inclusion piece, I think that's really where Family Paws stands out, is we don't just say separate your dog. We talk about how can we include your family dog in the family in a way where everybody is comfortable, including, as Elysia pointed out earlier, the parents. And there's no rush to any of this. And we use these concepts to develop a plan for every family, which I think of it as solving a puzzle when I go in to help out my families. And I love doing this. It's okay. Where are we at in this family? What is the situation? Who is this dog? Who is this family? What is the setup? And how do we use all these puzzle pieces to shuffle around into a situation that lends itself to creating comfort and allowing for that inclusion so that the dog can start developing those bonds that we want so badly between our dogs and our children.
Yeah. And that whole, everything that you guys are saying, first of all, there's so much information, even just the awareness part that you just talked about. Like, there is so much that I really do urge people to contact like one of us, a professional, because there's so much to go over it. It's just not just like, oh, you're going to listen to this 20-something minute podcast and you're going to, learn it all. I think it's really to let people know there is help out there. There are professionals, just like I tell people with like dogs with reactivity and stuff. You have to contact somebody that can help you through these times, because there is help out there for both baby and toddlers. I have to say, I would love to have both of you back on, because I think we can really, and I'm sure I'm going to get a ton of comments on social media about these things. I would love to really narrow down on certain topics, like you were saying, on what certain things with the baby, even just coming home from the hospital is a whole thing. I mean, I can talk about this, forever. I think it would be important for people if we can just give them those little breakdowns for the podcast. But first of all, where can we find Family Paws? We'll start with you, Lisa. And if I'm in, or anywhere really, both of you in the world, I'm sure you could get a virtual appointment with one of these wonderful trainers, but where can they find you, Lisa? And what's the best way to get into, by the way, on the Family Paws website, there is so much information.
I was just going to mention that.
Yeah, free information that you can look up, but where can they find you, Lisa, if they want to look you up?
Well, let me start with Family Paws Parent Education. If you go to their website, she has actually put dog aware in there right on the front page if you scroll down. And she talks about those 4 pillars of dog aware. And the very first one, body language, is actually an interactive section where you can do some learning right there. And then there's a description of the other 3 with future plans to develop that more. And then through Family Paws, there's lots of levels of support. There is certainly plenty of free information. I give Jen so much credit because so much is behind a paywall now. But there is a lot of information at Family Paws for people who just want to start there. And then she has her webinars. In fact, Elysia is doing the next live webinar I think it's Dogs and Toddlers in March.
Awesome.
I'll be doing one. I think my next one is June. And then there's the whole educator locator, which is one of her tabs on her website, which you go to and you put in where you're at, and even in a different country. And you can look up who's near to you. But there are also people that do remote that can reach a lot further than where you locally are. I actually have a client right now that's up in northern Maine. There are no trainers near them. And I have been helping them with their dogs since before their child was born. The child is now a toddler. I am in the Boston area, north of Boston, and my business is actually Fingers and Paws Dog Training. And I have, as with Elysia, made this the focus of my business. And I used to run classes as well and take on other cases. I do still, if they're local enough, take on other cases, but this is so much my focus that I prefer to stay part-time and be flexible. So I know Elysia does this as well with Jen, but I make sure that I'm available if Jen gets one of those hotline calls that says, I'm in the emergency room, there was a bite, I need help now. Because so many trainers are so busy, good trainers get filled up. And sometimes these people just need triage. And so I will do that. And again, that comes through the Family Paws. But for people that find me myself, I have my website. I put all that information about who I am on there and what I do. I don't do group classes anymore. I do private sessions, either in your home or remotely.
Awesome. Love that, Lisa. And then Elysia, where can people find you?
Yeah, my company is Positive Families Education and Training, and there's actually 2 of us that are both educators, Family Paws educators. And yeah, you can find us on positive, positive families.com. And we both also very much specialize in baby and toddlers, and then Carrie does more older kids stuff. But that's where they can find us. We also have Instagram, Facebook. You can follow us there just by doing the old Google Family Paws. Or
Yes.
Positive Families.
And you can find both of us through the educator locator as well, just by our names.
Awesome. I love that. And I have to thank you guys so much for taking the time. I know it was like kind of last minute. I'm glad you guys were able to get on here. Again, Barks to Basic with Jamie Diaz. You can find us at Dynamite Dog Training, at Lucky Dog Training Club. I'm also an educator if you need to reach out to. And Barks to Basic on anywhere where podcasts are. You can listen, Audible, Spotify, all of them. And also on our YouTube channel, you can watch our beautiful faces live, not live, but recorded. So thank you again, and we'll see you next time.